in questions. And what we want to do is make sure we get some of buyers' most important questions answered for them. But how do we know which lender to choose and who to work with?
Well, that's a great question, and obviously you probably get asked that question all the time. And one of the
Naturally.
challenges of working with a mortgage lender is if people are using the internet nowadays, which they do for pretty much everything, and they
Hmm.
type in just mortgage banker or mortgages, they're going to find thousands upon thousands of results. So
Hmm.
a lot of times, what I recommend to people is to actually talk to their real estate agents. Their real estate agents are there as a source of information as well as an advocate for people in our industry that do a great job, whether it's a mortgage person or a title person or even a home inspector.
Hmm.
All of us in our business have a reputation and have a job to uphold. And so if people are asking you as a real estate agent to refer out a mortgage person or a few, obviously it's because they want to rely on your expertise and knowledge because you've sat at settlement tables, you've been to closings, and you've probably experienced some circumstances where things didn't go very well. And in your expertise, because you're working to make sure that transaction goes smoothly, you want to make sure that that person is working with somebody who can get them to the table on time, meet their
Hmm.
commitment dates, and of course, see their closing all the way through to the end. So that's where I come in.
Yeah, naturally. And that's, as a real estate professional, usually any recommendation that we give just comes from past experience, past buyers or sellers that we've worked with before that have had success with a particular vendor, whether that's a lender, home inspector, like you mentioned, termite inspector, whatever it may be. Any recommendation we give is usually going to be come from a positive experience that a past client has had. But we know that there's a lot of other information that goes into choosing a lender. And we find that a lot of buyers are really focused on who has the lowest rates and fees. And naturally, that's very important. But is there anything else that they should be comparing and contrasting between lenders other than just rates and fees?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Adam. First of all, rates are important. And, at the end of the day, you have to, the customer has to remember they have to write that check out every single month. And no
Hmm.
lender wants to be in a borrower's thoughts every month when they're writing out that check and they're not happy about the rate that they receive.
Right.
However, a mortgage transaction is much more than just who has the best rate. There's always going to be a company or a credit union or a small bank or lender that could possibly have a better interest rate than the person that you're speaking to on a phone to get your prequal. But what you have to also think about is number one, if that mortgage person that I'm talking to has rates that are competitive within his or her marketplace, is that also something that I should consider? I mean, competitive means maybe within an eighth or a quarter of, the very best interest rate that you might be able to receive. And a lot of time, in my case in particular, Ally does have the most competitive interest rates, but sometimes we're not. And that is
Hmm.
something that ultimately, it's up to the consumer to call and find out who has the best rates of the day. But what they should also be asking about are things like fees. Um, my fees happen to be under $1,000 in regards to our origination fee, where many lenders are, sometimes one and a half or two times as much. And so fees are oftentimes an important thing too. And one of the things I like to remind our clients is not only are fees and rates important, but service. And, as I mentioned earlier, my availability is from 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. every single day, including weekends. And my processing and underwriting staff is located literally within, a short distance from my desk. And so
Right.
what that means to the consumer is that at any given time during the course and process of their loan, I can, give them an update on, where their loan status is at that current moment because I see it every single day. And that's one of the beauties about service that we can provide that other lenders can't. Many lenders have processing or underwriting that might not even be in the same state as where our
Right.
buyers are purchasing. And who's going to know the market better than somebody who actually lives or works in your marketplace? It would be like trying to buy a home in Ocean City by using a real estate agent in California. It's probably
Hmm.
not going to work very well. And that California agent probably isn't going to know a whole lot about the Ocean City marketplace. So, dealing with somebody who's not only local, but also somebody who's been in the industry for a while as I mentioned earlier, I've been in the mortgage industry now 23 years. My company has been open for over 25 years. So what that means to the customer is we're not going anywhere,
Yeah.
and we're going to be able to see this transaction through all the way from the beginning to the end, which to me is a lot more important than just getting the best rate. Because if I'm sitting there at the closing table and there's no package, there's no loan officer, but I've got really great rates, well, what did that rate really cost me? So that's what I always
Oh
remind.
yeah. That brings up an interesting point. Is it guaranteed that you're actually going to make it to the closing table? I mean,
No,
regardless of the rate and fees, are you going to actually make it to the closing table? And that's something in our experience we find a lot, particularly with some of these internet banks and some of the folks that are not local, like you mentioned. The rates and the fees may be fantastic. Sometimes even the service could be great. But some of the hurdles that we have to go over that a lot of times just are due to the local ownership style, the way properties are insured locally, whatever it may be, we find out 30 days into it that the lender can't actually get the buyer to the closing table for one reason or another. Do you find that as well? Do you ever have buyers coming to you that weren't able to get to the closing table with their previous lender?
absolutely. In our business, we call that saving the day. And it's a shame to actually get that phone call because usually the buyers are so frustrated that they almost get to the point where they want to walk away. But because they have a contractual obligation now, maybe they're close to their commitment date or even past it, we want to do everything we can to not only keep that together for the borrower, but also keep that together for the listing agent and the buyer's agent.
Hmm.
So what I've oftentimes found is that a person can get through, the beginning parts of the transaction. Maybe they can get their pre-qualification and have a very smooth go of it. But also, what I find is maybe their pre-qualification is based on just an exchange of information verbally, and maybe that borrower is self-employed, for example. And maybe the really, a more thorough job would be to examine those tax returns that the borrower files to see if they actually have income that we can use versus income that the borrower writes off. There's a big difference when it comes to
Hmm.
qualifying and actually, being qualified for a loan. So what I've oftentimes found is that mortgage bankers or brokers do a poor job up front of asking all the right questions. And more so than ever, it's important for buyers and for mortgage people to have an open line of communication and the ability to exchange information well so that we can review and actually approve that information prior to
Got
that
it.
buyer going and putting a bid in on a property. We don't want
Right.
to see people get through 30 days in the process and tie up other people's time just to find out that we're going to pull the carpet out from underneath of them. So asking the right questions up front is important. Representing the right information as well accurately as a buyer is important too. So the onus is on every party involved to make sure that we do a good collection of information. And, after all, our business is to get everybody to the table.
So knowing that, when somebody is choosing a lender, what questions should they be looking out for when they speak to that lender?
Well,
Sometimes they may not even speak to a lender. It could just be an online form that they're filling out.
true.
And as a real estate agent, we want to make sure that if a buyer falls in love with a home, that the seller, the listing agent, are actually going to accept that offer. So, from a lender's perspective, what information does a lender need to know to make sure that we're bringing a well qualified buyer to a seller and give them the best opportunity for their offer to be accepted?
Most buyers across the board have to give a lender the same information um, every time. So we ask about a borrower's income. We ask about a borrower's assets or down payment monies. And we obviously will review a borrower's credit with them to make sure that they're credit worthy in being able to qualify and get committed for a mortgage loan. I think that many lenders try to um, do things quickly or not so thoroughly when it comes to the information collection for income or for assets. And we absolutely, as an industry, can do a better job than any online company when you're dealing with somebody who not only has the experience in the industry, but knows what it takes to get a loan to the table. That's why dealing with a mortgage person such as myself or many of my counterparts that are, great competitors of mine, um, I think we're asking the right questions because we certainly care about everybody having a great experience. But one of the things that we certainly do that I think other lenders might not do is, we don't put our trust in a 5 or 6 question online application, or app on their phone, to help them to get qualified for probably one of the biggest purchases that they'll ever make in their lives.
Of
Um,
course.
Technology is great, and can do so many things well, but when it really comes down to brass tacks, I have to say that talking to somebody and actually reviewing their income and their assets with them, makes all the difference in ensuring a smooth transaction. They might be pulling monies from a 401k, or from a IRA or some other source of assets that the online lender would never even ask about. And if something were to, God forbid, happen where they couldn't source that proof of deposit or that proof of funds, well, all of a sudden, 30 days into the transaction, they have to decline it because we have unverified funds. Whereas a mortgage banker could look at that information and say, oh, well, you know what? We need to do a better job of documenting this. We can either, look at this asset, or maybe you have other assets someplace else that we can review instead. And that would save somebody a lot of time and aggravation down the line, just by doing something that's rudimentary for people who have experience in the industry.
George Kemble here from Allied Mortgage. George, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what your company does, and what you represent?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today, Adam. As you said, I'm George Kemble. I'm a mortgage banker with Allied Mortgage Group. I've worked for Allied now going on 7 years, and I've been in the mortgage profession now for 23 years. So I'm not just somebody that came into the business recently or during an uptick in business. I've seen the ups and downs, the goods and bads of business, and currently we're in a fantastic market. So when you wake up every day and you do what I do, and you feel like you're making a difference in people's lives, it really is a good feeling. And every day I get to experience that.
Terrific. George, if somebody needs to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Well, the two best ways to get in touch with me is always, first, my cell phone. My cell phone number is area code 856-287-0760. And my email address is gkemble, that's GKEMBLE, at alliedmg.com. And people can feel free to call at any time. I work from 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. every single day. That includes weekends, because
Fantastic.
a lot of people go out and look for homes on the weekends. And if they want to put in an offer, they should know that their mortgage person is standing by waiting to help them.